let's talk about King of the Hill again. As one of my favorite adult shows, I have a lot of respect for King of the Hill. This show revolves around Hank Hill and his little community in Arlen, Texas. This show is also an episodic slice of life that has great continuity. All three of these things are pretty important to King of the Hill. Because each episode is a slice of life, we get to have character development that sticks, and on some occasions we also get morals that can apply to anyone. In fact, most episodes I would talk about positively have some form of moral, or just do something so well I want to talk about them. King of the Hill was a good show because in 13 seasons they rarely, if ever, talked down to their audience. This is an accomplishment because most adult shows I've seen talk down to their audience under the guise of humor. Now, King of the Hill did address some subjects that usually would end in someone being talked down to, like today's episode, Hank's bully. So we open and it seems that the Hill's neighborhood has grown a little as new neighbors have moved in on the block. They seem to be shut-ins, rarely leaving their house, and Hank manages to catch them arriving home and introduces him and his family to the new people on the block. The parents have a son named Caleb who is only 10. This is important to the reason why I'm talking about this episode. I'm not going to talk about the B-plot very much just here. Dale and Peggy enter into the taxidermy competition. They lose. So while Hank is working in his garage, Caleb comes in and starts being a general annoyance. Playing with Hank's tools and knocking over a bucket of, I assume, paint. I'm going to note how patient Hank is. He doesn't raise his voice and is fairly gentle with how he speaks to and treats Caleb. Later, Hank is watering his lawn and Caleb starts riding his bike on Hank's lawn, before he starts calling Hank names. Later, he knocks a beer out of Hank's hands, and finally, Hank starts to raise his voice at Caleb, but you can tell he still is trying not to. Bill comments about how Hank is being bullied, and later in the episode, we see Hank talking to his mailman. Caleb shows up and starts being annoying again, and it's at this point that Hank does something that I respect. Hank talks to Caleb's parents about the behavior that Caleb is exhibiting.
Oh, teasing's just his way of showing how much he likes you.
Yeah, actually, it's more like harassing.
That's just his way of testing you. He's just so smart. The best thing to do when he gets that way is to ignore him.
Caleb's parents brush off Hank's concerns even after stating that Caleb has been harassing him. Hank clearly states one of the things that Caleb has been doing, and the parents ignore it. And I hate these two. So Hank throws a barbecue and Caleb steals Hank's work hat. Hank raises his voice more, and Caleb's parents still refuse to do anything about their child. Afterwards, while Hank is throwing out his welcome to the neighborhood items, Caleb starts throwing those firework poppers at Hank,
which is assault.
Hank, finally fed up, snaps after Caleb grinds his bike's tire into Hank's lawn. For those keeping count, Caleb has messed with propane by stealing Hank's Strickland hat and messed with Hank's lawn. He has broken at least 2 cardinal sins. Hank takes Caleb's bike and locks it in his garage, and then Caleb gets his parents to call the police on him. Hank is forced to return the bike, and this is the 3rd episode where we see the cops treat Hank like this. At least in this episode, unlike the other 2, Hank did something wrong. So the next day, Bill and Boomhauer try to get Hank to come outside, and Hank makes some excuses not to. Caleb then feeds a water hose through Hank's mail slot. The episode says it is a felony, by the way. So Hank tries to pay some people to scare Caleb, but backs off when he realizes the people would do something highly illegal. Eventually, Bill says something that makes Hank realize he only has one option.
Too bad we're not little people. Then it would be a fair fight.
Bobby.
Hank recruits Bobby to do exactly what Caleb has been doing to Hank, to Jim, Caleb's father. Caleb's parents come over and Hank feeds them the same response that they gave Hank. Hank clues them into Bobby's presence, and they realize that they are now in Hank's shoes. Hank isn't going to tell Bobby to stop unless they discipline their kid. When given the option of dealing with their own child-sized bully, Jim and Lila decide to parent their kid, and Bobby returns the hat that he took from Jim. I'm not going to pretend like parenting isn't hard. It is incredibly hard. There is no right way to do it, but there are hundreds of wrong ways. Every child is different. Just because something works for one doesn't mean it works for another. But a parent's job is to parent a child, to set them up for the best future possible. Caleb's parents let him run wild and do whatever he wanted. And I have personally seen what happens when you allow that. Children do need rules. I get the parenting is hard and you can be too hard on a kid as well as too soft. The key is to balance it. Treat your kids with the respect they deserve. And if your kid is smarter than others their age, that's fine. But it will not excuse bad behavior. I don't care how smart your kid is. If they're a bad person, they are a bad person. and it is mainly the job of the parent to guide them to be better. And yeah, I get it. Not every family is going to have 2 parents and 1 kid. Sometimes you have a bunch of kids and one of them is just not acting right. It happens. And sometimes you have 1 kid and that kid has 1 parent. It sucks. I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10 because despite Caleb being incredibly annoying, this episode has a very poignant message.